Welcome to the 23rd episode of The Lucid Truth, Lucid Dreaming of Another World, with Robert Waggoner. Robert is the author of the famous book of Another World, with Robert Waggoner. Robert is the author of the famous book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, and is one of the most well-known experts on the subject of lucid dreaming. He and I discuss what lucid dreams are, how to lucid dream, the science behind lucidity, and what it may say about the nature of consciousness. So please welcome Robert Waggoner. Welcome, Robert. It's great to have you on The Lucid Truth, which is very fitting because we're going to be talking about lucid dreaming finally on The Lucid Truth.
It's great to be here, Isaac. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I guess to start out, can you tell us a little bit about your work on lucid dreaming and your book, Gateway to the Inner Self?
Yeah, so I've actually written two books. The first one is Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. And that's a book I wrote in 2008. It's in its 14th printing. It's been also translated into Chinese and Korean and Czech and Finnish and other languages.
Wow.
So it's gotten around there. Yeah. And then I have another book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. And that's the book that has all the tips and techniques on how to become lucid and how to stabilize the lucid dream so you can explore and experiment better. And that came out 5 or 6 years ago with my co-author Carolyn McCready, and it's in French and German and Chinese and other languages. So I've been a lucid dreamer for a long time, going on 4 decades, and in all those years I've really learned a lot. I actually taught myself how to lucid dream before the scientific evidence of lucid dreaming even occurred. So that's how long I've been around and playing around with lucid dreams.
Wow, that's interesting. So how did you come across lucid dreaming in the first place if the scientific evidence had predated your experiences?
Well, so back in 1975, I was a junior in high school, and I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda. He was a UCLA graduate student who decided he wanted to study psychoactive plants like peyote and mescaline and stuff. And so according to his books, he went down to Arizona, met a shaman named Don Juan, who was going to teach him about all of this. And so in this third book, Journey to Ixtlan, in this book, his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, tells him to try and find his hands in the dream state and realize he's dreaming and become aware of dreaming. And so I'm sitting there reading that, I'm just, probably 16, 17 years old. And I'm thinking, can someone really do this? Can you do this? And I looked around and there wasn't a technique in the book on how to do it exactly. So what I did each night before I'd go to sleep, I'd just look at the palms of my hands while using the power of suggestion. I'd just repeat in my head, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. I do that for about 5 minutes, fall asleep. On the third night of doing this practice, I'm walking through my high school hallway, and all of a sudden, just like they're spring-loaded, my hands popped right in front of my face, and I thought, oh, my hands, this is the dream.
Oh.
And it was such a trip to realize that those football players over there, hey, those guys, they're dream figures. And I reached over and touched the wall, and the wall just felt cool and nubby like it would in waking life. And then I walked outside and just had an extraordinary lucid dream. It was just a powerful first lucid dream. So that's how I got going. But I want to tell you what happened. So I'd tell my friends, and they'd say, oh, you're just having a dream about dreaming, or you can't become conscious within the unconscious. And I'd say, no, I'm becoming aware in my dreams. And so it wasn't until January of 1981, I was at my college university library, and there the issue Psychology Today had an article by Stephen LaBerge where he shared the proof of lucid dreaming and how he, in scientific experiments, showed that lucid dreaming was real.
Wow, so I guess everyone kind of had to believe you after that.
Yeah, that was the great thing, because then I could talk about it, because other times I'd talk to people about it and they'd just look at me like you're losing it, and you are lost to delusion. So when those experiments were done, then it became a full-fledged thing that you could talk to people about, and you began to meet other lucid dreamers and stuff like that.
Wow, that's awesome. So what were these first experiments? Were these the ones where they had the eye movements? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, so that's how there's Stephen LaBerge at Stanford out in California, and there was Keith Hearn at the University of Hull in England. And actually, Keith Hearn was first. So he was a grad student at the University of Hull, and he met this guy, Alan Worsley, who said that he could become consciously aware in the dream state. He could lucid dream. And so Keith Hearn thought, well, how could you prove it? And then he realized that in most dreams, we have rapid eye movement. And he thought, boy, I bet if you were consciously aware of dreaming, if you're lucid, then you can move your eyes left to right in the lucid dream, and it would probably make your physical eyes move left to right. And if you could see that on a rapid eye movement polygraph paper readout, then that would be evidence for a lucid dream. If you told the guy, before he goes to sleep, when you become lucid, move your eyes left to right 8 times, and then have that in the REM readout. And so that's what Alan Worsley did. I think it was April 12th, 1975. And that was the same exact time that I was teaching myself how to become lucidly aware. So Alan Worsley, this great lucid dreamer, did it. And I remember Keith Hearn said that when he saw that REM readout and knew he had the evidence for lucid dreaming, he said, philosophically and scientifically, it was mind-blowing. It was like getting messages from another world. Because here's a guy who's sleeping. They have physiological measures of him sleeping, but with his eyes, he's moving back and forth 8 times and signaling to the world that he's aware within a dream.
Wow, that is an amazing experiment. So in terms of the lucid dreaming landscape, I like how you said it's from another world, at least in the experimental design. What do you think about the nature of that landscape? Do you think it relates at all? Do you think it's completely a sleeping landscape that's produced by the brain? Or do you think maybe it connects to some kind of universal consciousness? What are your thoughts on the nature of the landscape?
One thing that I'd say is that all of us lucid dreamers start to realize that there are certain principles or certain kind of guidelines or rules that you should follow, like, for example, to have a long lucid dream. So you don't want to get too excited. Almost everyone has realized that if you get too excited, you're going to pop out of the lucid dream. So you can't get too excited. Mm-hmm. You also see how your beliefs and expectations are reflected in the lucid dream. So, for example, if I expect to fly easily through the wall, knowing that it's a dream wall, normally I'll fly through very easily. But if I get up to the wall and it looks really solid and everything, and I expect to have trouble, then I'll bounce back. So that kind of shows that the nature of the landscape, the nature of the lucid dream landscape, it's mentally reflective. You really can't understand your lucid dreams unless you're also paying attention to your beliefs and your expectations and your focus and your intent. At least that's what I learned after all these years. But there are some wonderful stories, whether the nature of the landscape is a collective unconscious or if it's just kind of your own virtual reality. I create this magazine. It's a free online magazine that anyone can get at dreaminglucid.com. It's called the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine. And my friend Lucy Gillis and I have been publishing it for 20 years now. and you can click on these old past issues. But there was this one guy, Brian, so readers submit their lucid dreams, and we have articles and stuff. This one guy, Brian, shared this incredible lucid dream. And so what happened, the night before he had this lucid dream, he was watching a TV show about the migration of animals. And he was sitting there thinking, gosh, why do these sea turtles migrate like 1,500 miles just to lay their eggs, and then they migrate all the way back to whatever, the Hawaiian Islands or whatever. And so that night he became lucidly aware, and he stabilized the lucid dream. And then he basically asked, why do sea turtles migrate so far? And he said, suddenly it's like he got shot up above the earth. He's looking down at the earth, and he sees that it's just one giant continent. And so some geologists theorize, that hundreds of millions of years ago, there was just one giant continent. And so he's looking down, from high up in outer space in his lucid dream, and he sees this little turtle swim across the bay and lay its eggs. And so it only swims like 40 or 50 miles. And then as he watches, the lands begin to break apart into continents. And now that's little sea turtle, now it has to swim 400 miles to lay its eggs. And then he keeps watching, and the continents become more defined and start spreading further apart. And now this sea turtle is going 1,500 miles to lay its eggs. And he said when he woke up, he said it was like he had connected with the collective unconscious, and he had picked up the exact reason why sea turtles migrate so far. That at the beginning of time, it was very close swimming across to the other side of the bay. But as the continents break apart, then it becomes a 1,500 mile exercise. So anyway, when you have those kind of lucid dreams, that's when you wonder, boy, is it really a collective unconscious? What's going on here? So that's a great question.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of psychedelics, because the word psychedelic means mind manifesting. And so a psychedelic is going to show you a reflection of your inner self in a way. But also you can have experiences like that where it is also like a portal, and you're seeing like the birth of the universe and the emerging collective consciousness. So it seems like there's a connection between something that shows the reflection of your inner self and something that can take you beyond that. So can you explain to us the inner self, gateway to the inner self? Is this like the higher self, as many people put it? What is this inner self?
Yeah, so just to kind of explain, so again, back in 1975, I taught myself how to lucid dream, and for 5 or 6 years, I just did it by myself, and that's when I learned the principles of lucid dreaming, how it reflects back to you, your beliefs and expectations, and how you can't get too excited and all that kind of stuff. But then in the early 80s, there was a group of us, about 30 people. We started a Lucid Dreamers Explorers group. And every month we'd have a goal to achieve. And back in those days, you'd have to type out your lucid dream about how you achieved the goal or didn't achieve it and send it to somebody, and they'd make photocopies, and then they would send the photocopies to everybody. So this is before the internet. So I'm getting to your point here. So one month, the goal was to find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. And so I became lucid. I remembered what the goal was. I followed this woman into an office. Inside the office, there was a receptionist and 2 ladies, and then there was this guy in a 3-piece suit. And so I walked up to the guy and I said, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And I just thought the guy would respond to me just like in other lucid dreams. But instead, what happened is a voice boomed out a partial response from high above him. And I thought, what? Boy, that was weird. And so then I asked for a clarification. I just kind of looked up in the sky and says, like what? And then it boomed out a full response of what the guy represented. So I thought, okay, I've done the goal, so I'm going to wake up and write this down before I forget. But the next morning, I began to think, what was that voice, that invisible voice? And so I began to wonder, is there an awareness behind the dream? So, for example, could you in a lucid dream ignore the dream figures, ignore the dream setting, and just shout out a question to your unconscious mind or this awareness behind the dream. And that's what I started doing in 1985, and it blew my mind. Just shouting out something like, "Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see." Sometimes the entire lucid dream would change. Sometimes just one thing would change. You get asked to experience concepts and things like that. And what was great about my book being published in other languages, I hear from other people all around the world who are just blown away when they stop in the lucid dream and do like I instruct, and they ask a question of this non-visible awareness. You could call it the unconscious mind, you could call it your inner self, but something responds, and it's much more creative and amazing than the ego waking self.
Wow, that is very interesting. That actually reminds me of a lucid dream I had once where it was one of my first ones, so I wanted to fly. And I asked this dream figure who had manifested itself as one of my friends how I could fly. And it said, "I don't know why you're asking me. I'm a manifestation of your unconscious." I thought, oh, well, that's not very helpful. So I went and tried to figure it out on my own. But it's interesting to think about whether or not either way it's fascinating, whether or not this is a subconscious representation of your inner landscape, or if it's still that, but if it's connected to more of a universal conscious grid. I've always wondered if you could use lucid dreaming experiments to try to find out if some kind of conscious grid like that does exist.
Well, so I go around the world and give talks and have given workshops on 4 different continents. And the interesting thing is, when some of your listeners might know, there's a lucid dreaming community called LD for All.
Oh, that's the first one I've ever found, actually, back when I was like 13, 14. Yeah.
Yeah. So my good friend Pascal, or Q, is kind of the person who runs that particular website, and it's a wonderful forum and a great place for people to kind of meet and learn more about lucid dreaming. But like one time there at the LD for All, they had a goal that month to find the beginning and end of the universe. And so Pascal wrote that she became lucidly aware. She looked in a mirror and she announced, "Now show me the beginning and the end of the universe." And that's when this non-visible voice responded, "The universe has no beginning and has no end. The universe is an everlasting cycle." And so what I'm trying to get across here is that this awareness behind the dream, or you can call it your inner self or the unconscious mind, it doesn't always agree with what you say. So I don't think it's the subconscious. I think the subconscious would just call up anything that seemed halfway decent. When this awareness behind the dream disagrees with what you have to say or the premise of your assumption, and then proposes an alternative viewpoint, then it suggests that it's something apart from you. Like there's another example. My good friend Ed Kellogg, he's an incredible lucid dreamer. He became lucidly aware, and he's really interested in quantum physics and modern physics. And so he had already made a plan, so he became lucid and stabilized lucid dream. And then he shouted out that he wanted a superstring to manifest. And so in quantum physics, there's this idea of superstrings. That's when this voice, this non-visible voice, replied that to do an experiment of this type requires careful focus and intention. You seem too distracted at this moment to successfully complete this. And basically it told him to come back when he was ready for the power of the experience. And so that's what I try to get across to people, because sometimes when you ask to have these conceptual experiences, they are such a kind of mind blow that you really got to kind of gut it out to kind of work through it. So again, that's why I don't think this is the subconscious mind. And I don't think it's the unconscious, like the waistband of all your conscious thoughts. I really think that this is an inner self, that this is an awareness beyond the ego self-awareness. And that's why in my book, I use some quotes by Carl Jung. He said that inside of us, we might have a second psychic system, but someone would have to show that this second psychic system had imagination, had affectivity or feeling, had memory, and he gave about 12 characteristics. And in these lucid dreams that I've had and collected from others, you can see all of these characteristics. Because like with that case with my friend Ed Kellogg, basically his inner self told him, you're not ready for what you're asking for, but if you get your head together and come back again and try it, then maybe you can experience it. So that shows kind of a sense of feeling and judgment and reflection and all. Anyway, that's why I think that lucid dreaming, if you practice it like I talk about in my books, you'll see that you can connect with your inner awareness.
Okay, that is extremely interesting. I have an idea about this inner landscape myself. I think it's beyond your ego as well. I think it's beyond your subconscious mind. And I've always thought about using psychedelics to prove this, and so I'll run this past you real quick and then connect it to lucid dreaming. So I've always thought that DMT, the psychedelic, had potential to access your inner landscape of awareness, that kind of like we're talking about. But I've always wanted to put it to the scientific test. So there's these things in this psychedelic landscape. They're called machine elves, and they have their own autonomous consciousness. They seem to exist outside your own mind, like they're making their own decisions. Right. So I always thought, what if we tried to contact them? So give one person DMT and have them tell the being a number, like 23. Then send someone else and ask what the number was. And if you got the same number, you would prove it's an objectively real landscape within the mind. So I was wondering if you could do something like that with lucid dreaming. Maybe you could have a lucid dreaming slumber party. Everyone comes over, we go to hang out, but then we just all go to sleep. But that's just when it all gets started.
Well, in this first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, I have a chapter on mutual lucid dreaming. And that's when two people try to become lucidly aware on the same night at the same time, meet up, exchange a secret word and a secret gesture, and then when they wake up in the morning, send it to a fair witness, so you don't contaminate the other person's report or something like that. And I talk about some of the successes we had where the person would pick up the secret word or pick up the gesture, or they'd have lucid dream reports that were very, very similar. So the one thing I do want to say, though, that this is really a challenge even for an experienced lucid dreamer. So I don't think I'd make it the first thing to do. But it does seem to suggest that in some dreams or lucid dreams, there's actually information is exchanged. I remember I was on that, there's a lucid dreaming community. They're based in the Netherlands. And so when my first book came out, my publisher insisted that I join one of these groups. And so that one seemed it's the one that Tim Post is at. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, so some of the kids started talking, could you meet someone in a lucid dream? And I said, sure, you could. Or pass on information. And they asked me to show them. And so I told them to find they asked me how it could occur. I said it occurs through dream telepathy. And there's actually been NIH, National Institute of Health Studies on dream telepathy. But anyway, they had me do about 5 dream telepathy things, and it blew the people who set it up, it blew their mind. And I finally stopped because they were saying I was just doing it to show off or something like that. But more to the issue, it was actually showing the kids who were paying attention that you can pick up information that's sent by another, if you make that your intent. And there's a wonderful book written by Montague Allman. He was a psychiatrist in the 70s, and he realized that some of his psychiatric patients there at Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, that they were actually having dreams that were connected with Montague Allman, with his life. And that's when he realized that dream telepathy was real. And so then he got some National Institute of Health money to do some studies on dream telepathy that were very convincing. And so there's a whole history here. But then other scientists got involved, and there was one scientist in particular who later admitted that he basically did everything he could to make sure that the results would not pan out because he just thought it was too occultish or something to say that dream telepathy existed. And so the guy basically, he later admitted that he basically skewed the scientific system. He skewed it to make sure that this area would stop. And you can read a little bit about this, and there's a book by Robert Van de Castle. He's a professor emeritus from the University of Virginia. He's passed away about 10 years ago, but he wrote a big book called Our Dreaming Mind. And in there, he has a chapter on how he was part of these dream telepathy experiments in the 70s and 80s, and how that this one scientist, I'm not going to say his name, but he quotes the scientist who later told him that, he was so upset at the idea of dream telepathy that he made sure the experiment didn't work. And then that casts the whole thing into confusion because, some laboratories are getting excellent results and some laboratories aren't. And so, maybe this doesn't really exist. But anyway, so to your point, I don't think you need machine elves or anything like that. You just need someone who can focus on you, send you something, and then you can dream about it. And if you go to dreamtelepathy.com or read the books, you can kind of figure out a practice and see it for yourself.
Wow, that's so funny because normally people accuse parapsychologists for manipulating the data in their favor, and this is the opposite of that. So
exactly.
That's
And this guy is a famous scientist and all that kind of stuff. But on the other hand, some scientists are people too, and that's what everyone forgets, because if you go through the history of science, you'll see that there's a number of people who skewed their data so that they would have 5 years of fame or whatever, and some of them are caught, some of them aren't caught. But this guy basically confessed to Bob Van de Castle at the end of his life that he had skewed the results so that it wouldn't work.
Wow, that's very interesting. It reminds me of Daryl Bem's research. Are you familiar with his telepathy research in the social psychology department?
Nope. Tell me about that.
Well, Daryl Bem, there's a replication crisis going on in psychology, and it's leaking into the social sciences. And the reason why it's happening is a lot of studies are failing to replicate, which is like a cornerstone of psychological research. Exactly. Like the marshmallow test, that's not replicating, and that's you give a child a marshmallow now or 2 later. If they wait for 2 later, they're more successful in life. Right. So it's not replicating. So we're wondering how much of our foundational research is not valid. The reason why is because Daryl Bem came out about 10 years ago with 8 out of 9 studies proving that precognition and telepathy are real. And psychology freaked out because his methodology was flawless. He did everything right. So they figured that the methodology of psychology was flawed. And he's like, no, guys, like, telepathy is just real and possible. Like, that's all it is. You don't have to revamp your whole field. And that's actually what they're doing right now. And they give him a lot of credit for showing them the errors in their ways. And he's like, nothing's wrong. Like, it's all fine.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of modern physics, too. In modern physics, they talk about the observer effect. And that's what you see in lucid dreaming. The observer, when you observe that wall, if you know that it's dream stuff and you can easily fly through it, you can fly through it. But if you look at it in the lucid dream and it seems too solid, then you'll bounce right off of it, even though it is composed of dream stuff. But in modern physics, they're talking about the observer effect. Just the fact of observation changes what's being observed. And
Right.
so that's what's showing us that we think that everything is apart from us, but actually, our beliefs about it, our expectations, our focus and all really make a difference. And that's why, scientists try to do double blind studies on everything, so they don't have people's observations or inner biases somehow getting in the way of the results. And that's why in the field of psychology, replication, I think, is such a big hassle problem, because if you're a scientist who thinks it should work, then just like the observer influences the observed in modern physics, it's just going to bend that way for you. I mean, it's like Schrodinger's cat, If you
Right.
if you want the marshmallow to have an effect, it's going to have an effect. If you think that's a bunch of crap and stupid, then all of a sudden the results are going to show us a bunch of crap and it's stupid. So anyway, that it just shows that there's something more going on here, and science has a lot to learn.
Yeah, it does. Speaking of quantum physics, I was reading this very interesting report about lucid dream telepathy called Entangled Minds. And the most interesting part of this experiment was this guy tried to do dream telepathy with the traditional ESP kind of figures. And it was constant failure, years of failure. I ran failing for 30 minutes and just not getting it right. And then he found out that colored images transmitted effectively, and then he finally succeeded. And it was all these failures and then the eventual success. It's like, man, this guy must really be onto something. And I think maybe because they were doing them apart from each other, not in the same room, maybe the failures were due to trying to send an image when the other person wasn't in REM. It seems possible.
Yeah, I wonder about that. But because I got so interested in dream telepathy, I had a friend in Holland, and she and I, for about a year and a half, we did weekly dream telepathy experiments. So 1 week she'd be the sender, on a particular night, and I would try to dream of what she was sending, and then we'd compare notes in the morning. I'd send her what I'd dreamt and what I thought it might be. And so we did this back and forth. And we started to wonder, instead of sending photos or images or objects, we wondered, could you send music via dream
really?
telepathy? Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to tell you what happened. So I told her, okay, ladies first, you send here on Wednesday night and I'll try to dream it. And so I think she got this piece of music and she just kept listening to it all the time, imagining that she's sending it to me. That night, I had this crazy electronic rave music going through my mind all night. I was dreaming of this horrific electronic rave. I was so pissed off by the time I got up in the morning. I was totally pissed off. And so I told her that, you've sent me electronic rave music, and she laughed and said, yeah. And so then the next week it was my turn. And so I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And so I decided to get on YouTube and find out the Dutch national anthem, because my friend Suzanne lived in Holland. And so I'd focus on this YouTube clip of the Dutch national anthem being played at a soccer game. Anyway, her dream was that she and her father were walking to the nearby soccer stadium, and she thought, my dad hates soccer. Why are we walking to the soccer stadium? And suddenly they enter the arena, the doors open, and what happens? The Dutch national anthem begins to play. And so what I realized is that music, I think, gets transmitted probably 3 times better than images and trying to send an object or something like that. Music really comes through. In fact, we kept doing it with the music, and sometimes I would dream of the entire band. I'd realize, oh yeah, the drummer was black and the lead singer was a woman and blah, blah, blah. And these were groups that I'd never heard of. These were European groups, and it would all check out. So anyway, you're right. sometimes you can do an experiment, like try to do those Zener cards, those wiggle shapes, but then you just switch it to colors, and all of a sudden the colors come through without any trouble. But if you wanted to give it a try Dream Telepathy, sending music, and see what happens.
Robert, you just blew my mind, and here's why. That was so interesting. Remember I just told you about the DMT elf experiment? You give one a number, like 23, see what happens?
Yeah.
My friend told me that songs work better because that's their language. So why would we try to talk to them with numbers when that's our language, when we could use songs, which is their language? And she said that she has a song that can summon them, and it's all music. And one time she actually had a song that they gave her, and she put it on Spotify on a Psytrance album.
No way.
This is actually a song from the Machine Elves you can listen to on Spotify. I thought that was so cool. But it's interesting how it's the consistencies that are interesting, that somehow telepathic communication within this inner landscape consistently works better with music for some reason. That's fascinating.
Well, it's interesting. Like I remember Stephen LaBerge, so he's kind of the father of lucid dream research. He did experiments where he had lucid dreamers come into the sleep lab and signal with their eyes they're lucidly aware. And then he had told them, okay, when you become lucidly aware, I want you to do math problems. So do math problems in your lucid dream. And while they were doing it, lucidly aware, LaBerge's instrumentation could show that the left hemisphere of the brain, which is connected with mathematics, suddenly lit up, with more energy. And so then he had other lucid dreamers come in, become lucid, and he told them, when you become lucid, start singing or concentrate on music. And those who did that, their right hemisphere suddenly became more activated. But so we have these two hemispheres, and numbers are okay, but they're one hemisphere, and music, like you say, it just might come through more clearly and all, especially if the machine elves are already sharing songs with people. But that's kind of a Native American thing too. There's a lot of stories of Native Americans in their dreams or other experiences receiving songs and all. So anyway, you'll have to send me a link to your friend's Spotify machine elf music.
Yeah, I'll be sure to. Maybe it would be very good for lucid dreaming. We might be able to integrate that, communicate that message. We found the jackpot.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun. Have you ever, I wonder what you think about this. Alan Watts was giving a talk on dreaming one time, and he was saying, let's say you could dream any dream you want to dream. And you would start by fulfilling all your pleasures. You would fly, meet someone you've always wanted to meet. But then eventually, it's like a video game on God mode. You've been playing it on God mode for so long that you want something that's a little random, something that's not under your control, something that you're not quite expecting to integrate into the dream. And then he takes it a step further and says, eventually, you would dream the moment you're in today. You would dream the life you're living right now. And I thought that was a really great talk. Have you ever added a degree of randomness to your lucid dreams or heard of other people doing so?
Well, that's in my books. What I tell people, I say, lucid dreamers do not control the dream, not completely. So think of it. You become lucidly aware and you walk around the street corner and there's a whole new scene. There might be a church on one corner and a gas station on the other. Who created all that? You didn't intend it to be. So how can you say that you really control the lucid dream? If you fly through a wall and on the other side's a castle and a white horse, did you make that happen? How did that all come into being? And so that's why I write in my first book that the sailor does not control the sea, neither does the lucid dreamer control the dream. And what I'm trying to get across there is the sailor eventually gets to where he wants to. He gets to port, but he has to deal with the wind and the waves and the current and the boat and his own skills and all that kind of stuff. So lucid dreaming isn't so much about control. It's about more aware relating. and so you relate with greater awareness. But to your point about Alan Watts, that's why I encourage people to connect with the awareness behind the dream. I was giving some talks in London, and some people told me, well, talk to us a little bit about spiritual uses of lucid dreaming. And I said, well, the thing that I don't think they should try to do is to become lucid and try to find God or Buddha or whatever. I said, you'll just get too excited and you'll wake up. But if you want to have your mind blown, become lucidly aware, stabilize the lucid dream, and shout out to the awareness behind the dream, now let me experience unconditional love. Or now let me experience a moment of samadhi. Or now let me experience whatever spiritual concept you want to experience. People have had their minds blown. I remember I went back to London and a woman was at my next talk, and she said that she had stopped in a lucid dream and shouted out, now let me experience unconditional love. She said the resulting experience was so profound that she cried tears of joy for 15 minutes. She said she never knew love could be that deep and profound.
Wow.
And she was blown away. So that's why, Alan Watts is right. But my first 5 or 6 years of lucid dreaming, it was kind of the pleasure dome. Once I realized all the fun stuff you could do, I started to do it. But then after about 6 or 7 years, I started thinking, there's got to be something more going on here. And when I found that there was an awareness behind the dream, then that just catapulted my lucid dreaming to a new level. I remember there, Pythagoras was kind of a mystic, and he's the guy who got the Pythagorean theorem going and all. But he's supposedly said, and it's hard to know sometimes, these people are 2,000 or 3,000 years old, but he supposedly said that the soul was the self squared. So for example, if your self is a 3, then your soul is a 9, or if your self is a 4, then your soul is a 16.
Interesting.
But this awareness behind the dream is like that, because I discovered it after 10 years of lucid dreaming, and I knew how creative I could be in 10 years of lucid dreaming. I could, smash houses and, do all sorts of crazy stuff in the lucid dreams if I wanted to. But when I saw how much more creative this awareness behind the dream was, then I realized that its creativity is almost squared compared to what mine is. I mean, it's so much more vast. But again, Alan Watts has a interesting point there, and so that's a good thing to bring up.
Yeah, that's very interesting about the overwhelming feeling of love. It's like meta loving kindness meditation within the actual lucid dream. Have you ever heard of experiences of people meditating within a lucid dream?
Right. In my second book with Carolyn McCready, Lucid Dreaming Plain and Simple, we have a chapter on meditating in lucid dreams. And so we got a bunch of examples of people who had meditated in lucid dreams. One of the things I want to say about meditating in a lucid dream is when you talk about meditation, there's all sorts of different types. Some people chant a sacred syllable. Some people have a whole visualization thing. Some people follow their breath. Some people empty their mind. And so you get some different things. But for example, some people who would chant a sacred Buddhist mantra, all of a sudden they start to chant it in the lucid dream as they meditated in the lucid dream. And they'd say it would feel like 1,000 other people were saying the same chant at the same time. Oh. It was like the environment was shaking because everyone was chanting Om Mani Padme Hum or whatever. And I gave this story of my own experience. I'd probably been lucid dreaming for 15 years, and a friend asked me if I'd ever meditated. And so in my next lucid dream, I stopped on the trail I was walking on, and I began to meditate. And for me, that means emptying my mind, just letting everything go and empty my mind. And as I looked out at the dream screen, as I emptied my mind, suddenly it was like the dream in front of me, the screen of it, was being ripped apart, and this brilliant white light was coming through. And finally, it was so brilliant white light, I stopped, emptied my mind, and thought, well, gosh, maybe I should meditate with my eyes closed. And I did that, and within 30 seconds, I was having an extraordinary experience of transcendent oneness. But anyway, I was years later, I was on this workshop conference with Michael Katz, who's a Dzogchen Buddhist dream yoga teacher in New York City. And when he heard my story about how I had emptied my mind and the dream screen began to rip apart and brilliant white light came through, he said in his tradition, the Dzogchen tradition, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. When you empty your mind in the lucid dream, you're supposed to see the Rigpa, the base awareness that is behind everything. And he told me that he was blown away that someone who did this, who wasn't a Buddhist at the time, would have that experience. He said it just blew him away that someone would have that experience the first time. So anyway, meditating in a lucid dream, another great thing to do. And I should say one final thing. My good friend Claire Johnson, she submitted some of her lucid dream, meditating in a lucid dream. But she said the interesting thing was after she'd done it about 5 or 10 times in the lucid dream state, meditated in the lucid dream state, she said in the waking world, what used to take her about 20 minutes to get to a certain level of depth, after she had meditated in her lucid dreams 5 or 10 times, she said suddenly she could get there in 4 or 5 minutes. It was just like by doing it in the lucid dream state, it was like you cleared the pathway and could get deeper much faster than before.
Yeah, that sounds very useful. This white light thing that you felt, the way you put it as overreaching awareness reminds me of the idea of panpsychism, which is the idea of panpsychism is that consciousness is like a force or more like a property, and the whole universe experiences it. So if consciousness is what it's like to be something, if that's how you define it, then it's like something to be an atom, or it's like something to be the whole universe, and we're tapping into this grid in this field of consciousness. So if you can accelerate your connection to that by meditating in a lucid dream, that sounds very useful.
Oh yeah. And also I'd say that a lot of people who go deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, how I often explain to people that we exist in an interconnected oneness, that everything is conscious and alive. And to give kind of an example of that, in the final chapter of my first book, I talk about my wife and I floated down the Grand Canyon, down the Colorado River. And so you're with these, on these big rafting boats, and you float down the Grand Canyon. It takes an entire week. So anyway, about halfway through the trip, you stop at Havasu Falls or Havasu Creek Canyon, and you can hike up the 1.5 miles up to the falls. But my wife and I were on that trip, and there we are in Havasu Creek, and outside, it's probably 95, 100 degrees, but the creek water is just soft and silky. And I got in this meditative state, and for me, I realized that everything is conscious and alive. And so I reached out to the canyon, and I said in this kind of meditative state, "So canyon, what do you have to say to me?" And I heard clear as day, "Get out while you still can."
Oh!
And I sat up in the creek and I looked around and I thought, am I hurting an aquatic plant, or am I doing something wrong here? And then I thought, that was just my ego talking, that was just whatever. So I get back into a meditative state a few minutes later, and I reach out to the canyon again. I say, "Canyon, what do you have to say to me?" And this time I heard, and it was much more insistent. It said, "Get out while you still can." And so I stood up in the creek and I told my wife and these other people, I said, we got to get out of here. And my wife goes, "Why? This is heaven." And I said, there's something wrong. We got to get out of here. And then at that moment I looked up, and so you're kind of in not a really slot canyon, but you're in a very tight canyon. And I looked up and I could see just a tiny bit of a thunderstorm, just coming into view. And I said, look, a thunderstorm's coming. There's going to be a flash flood. And suddenly everyone, when they saw that, they realized I was right, that there's going to be a mess there, because in the Grand Canyon, there's no soil to hold the water. And when they have a thunderstorm, you just have flash floods. And so we helped push the women to get up on the trail. It's a real steep to get down to the creek. And then the boat crew came running up the trail, and they were screaming. They were panicked. Get back to the boat. There's going to be a flash flood. Get back to the boat. and thankfully, everyone got back to the boat, and then the heavens opened up. And what's wild in the Grand Canyon, this was in August, it's like 500 waterfalls appear from all over everywhere, because, the water just has to go somewhere, and it just starts headed towards the canyon. But anyway, I use that as an example just to say that as you go deeper into lucid dreaming, it's a whole journey. And I'm not a person who's done psychedelics or anything like that. So I'm doing it the old organic way, just following the lucid dreaming path. But you realize that everything is aware, and we're all part of an interconnected awareness. And if you'll kind of let go of your ego mind for a little bit and disassociate, you can reach out. You can reach out to your house. You can reach out to the city you live in. Everything's conscious and alive. But there's even more to it than that. But I don't want to bore you with all that kind of stuff.
No, I thought that was fascinating. It's like a mix between precognition and panpsychism simultaneously.
Yeah, it is really trippy. So what I'm trying to get to is part of this thing in lucid dreaming of reaching out to your larger awareness, just like my friend Claire became a better meditator by meditating in a lucid dream. In a lucid dream, when you reach out to your larger awareness and develop this clear communication, also in the daytime, you'll get intuitions that are just spot on. I mean, these things will come to you, and then you'll check them out, and you'll realize, oh my God, I was right. How, it doesn't make sense. Normally, you'd have to be told, and then you would check it out. I just got this inner sense, and then I found out that the inner sense was correct. So anyway, it just gets to kind of our basic thing, which is, what's the exact nature of the landscape? What's the nature of the unconscious mind? Why did the Buddhists create dream yoga and say that lucid dreaming and their Buddhist dream yoga was one of the 6 pathways to enlightenment? Why did these Native American traditions use lucid dreaming? Why do Sufis and Taoists use lucid dreaming? And it's all because they found something valuable there. There's much more to it than just having fun and seeking out pleasure. You can really do some trippy stuff, but it's a long path, and that's why I write books about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you said you've never experienced a psychedelic, but have you ever taken one in the lucid dream? Don't worry, you can tell us. That's legal.
Yeah, there's this funny guy, he's a Dutch guy, Careless. His name is Von Careless. Anyway, so over in Amsterdam, a lot of that stuff is legal, but he decided after a certain amount of time that he's going to give up psychedelics. But then about 10 years later, he became lucidly aware when he was flying on an airplane, and he thought, how did I get on an airplane? And he suddenly became lucidly aware. And so then just to see, the flight attendant came walking down the aisle, and he asked her, excuse me, ma'am, do you have any hash? And she kind of winked at him and went behind the curtain, and then she came back and whatever. And here was the funny thing. Here's the thing that I thought was so interesting. He said he imbibed, and he said when he woke up from the lucid dream, he was stoned for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
He said his body responded, with this kind of like muscle memory, this kind of psychedelic memory. he said he was just totally stoned, and he couldn't believe how powerful it was. But again, it just shows you the power of the mind to create and to reflect back to us our own beliefs and expectations and that kind of thing. And that's why in a lucid dream you really have to observe your mind. If you want to ride the mind, you have to observe it and kind of merge with it. Otherwise, you'll kind of be drug around by the mind and you won't understand what's happening. And I think that's why a lot of when my book first came out, I had a lot of people who were, I'm part of this psychedelic association, and we want you to come talk to us and stuff. Because I think they read in my book that I understood how the unconscious mind worked. And a lot of them had taken drugs and seen the unconscious mind from the inside, but they didn't get how it worked. And since I'd done it this kind of slow, lucid dreaming way, I could see how the principles worked and how you had to pay attention to your beliefs and expectations and your focus and your intent and your kind of mental energy to really understand it. So.
Yeah, that's definitely useful if you're ever out of money and can't find any hash on the street. Just do it that way. Man, that's
anyway,
hilarious.
I do want to say for anyone listening that I think there's truly this organic way. I think lucid dreaming is truly an organic way. And I have had a lot of people tell me that they read my book and they quit doing substances and just started going down the lucid dreaming path because of all the things. It was really the most incredible mind blow the lucid dreaming path was. And so I do want to say that I'm a person, I just don't believe in psychedelics. I see that some people use them, and sometimes when I read experiences like ayahuasca experiences, in the Amazon and stuff, you realize that it is somewhat like a lucid dream. It's kind of a chemically influenced lucid dream, which is a little bit of a different thing, but you do kind of see some of the similarities.
Yeah, I've always liked this phrase with psychedelics that says a biologist doesn't stare into the microscope and find something valuable and continue to stare at it. He takes it to the lab. You don't want to be dependent on something outside of yourself to be able to reach a state of awareness that you're trying to achieve. And so lucid dreaming is a way to have that fully within yourself. It's completely under your control. It's completely natural. I like how you said it's like a more real form of connection because it's all within.
Right. And that's the beauty of lucid dreaming. And that's why, but the incredible thing is when you start to connect with this larger awareness. Oh, I did want to tell you something about the larger awareness. So remember, it was back in 1985. I'd been lucid dreaming for 10 years. It was back in 1985 that I realized that there's an awareness behind the dream. And there's about 30 people in that Lucid Dreaming Explorers group, so they all got to see my lucid dream of when I kind of made this discovery. But it was about 8 years after that, I think it was like 1993, Carlos Castaneda came out with another book called The Art of Dreaming. Oh. And in that book, he asked his shamanic teacher, who or what is this non-visible awareness that responds to my questions in lucid dreams?
Oh.
And his shamanic teacher, Don Juan, said, I call that the dreaming emissary. It will always tell you the truth to whatever question you ask. And I thought people had said that Castaneda was just making all this stuff up and it was all just fiction. But I knew when I read that Castaneda, when he started talking about this awareness behind the dream that I discovered in 1985, I realized that he actually was quite a good lucid dreamer if he connected with the awareness behind the dream and all. So anyway, but there's even deeper stuff than that in lucid dreaming to go into, and that's why I write books. I don't care about the quantity of lucid dreams that people have. I know people have had 25 lucid dreams and just utterly blown their mind. And so for me, it's about teaching people how to have quality lucid dreams and really experience something incredible.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to have a quality measurement over quantity. Do you think that, because I remember you saying something about this, multiple dream layers. The reason I ask is this isn't quite the same thing as a dream within a dream. I was talking to somebody once, I was at a festival, and I had Callia Zacatiki, which is the dream herb. And I was like,
Right.
hey, do you wanna smoke some dream herb with me? It's like, what's that? I was like, it helps you lucid dream. He's like, I'm not going to sleep anytime soon, but sure. And he starts telling me about his lucid dreams. And he said that he could fragment his consciousness into like 100 different layers and experience them all simultaneously, which sounds like completely God mode. Did you think it's even possible to do that with 2 layers? Like, could you divide your lucid dream experience in half and experience 2 dreams at once, or a dream within a dream? I guess those are kind of separate questions, but seems a little out there.
Well, okay, so now I want to warn people. I'm going to talk about something, but I don't want people to do it because I don't want anyone who's not prepared to stumble into something. But I call it second level dreaming. And so imagine this: you become lucidly aware in a dream, and then in that lucid dream you fall asleep and become lucidly aware in that dream within the first level lucid dream. So now you're at the second level. And I'll tell you that is qualitatively a different experience than a typical lucid dream, which would be a first level lucid dream. So I hope that made sense what I'm saying. Do you get that?
So yeah. You're saying you go to sleep again within the first lucid dream and have another lucid dream?
Right. You fall asleep in that first lucid dream, and then you become lucid. So it's like second level of lucidity.
Okay, and what's that like?
Well, it's different. And so I remember it's just spontaneously happened to me 3 or 4 times. I haven't really searched out, maybe more than 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 or 10. But it reminded me one time I'd read a book by a Native American woman, and I think the book is called Not for Innocent Ears. So Not for Innocent Ears. And in this book, she talked about how her uncle was a shaman, and but sometimes she would stand outside the teepee or the sweat lodge or the whatever and kind of listen to what he was telling his initiates. And one time she became lucid, and basically she did that 7 times, and she didn't wake up. And so the next day, here's this little kid who just won't wake up. And, people would slap her, she won't wake up and everything. She basically laid there. And after it became abnormal, after like 16 hours of nonstop sleep, they went and found her uncle, the shaman, and he realized that he had to find her in the inner dimensions of dreams. And basically he told her that she should never ever do that again. So going to the 7th level was just like almost insanity to do something like that. But he basically, in a sense, followed the trail and connected, because what happens, just in a general sense, is at the first layer of lucid dreams, you can remember your name. Oh, I'm Robert Waggoner. Oh yeah, I live in this town. Oh, I'm this, that, and the other. All that stuff, you can kind of call it forth. But at the second level, it's like that connection is now more tenuous. You're at the second level. And so you can imagine at each progressive level, that ego self is just further away. I mean, it's like being out in Pluto realm or something. The Earth is a long ago distant memory. So anyway, but her shamanic uncle found her and helped her wake back to this waking world. And that was one interesting thing. One time I was on a online workshop on lucid dreaming, and there's this Native American woman, and she said that in Native American traditions, they didn't think of mental illness like we do in the Western world. And so everyone wrote her and said, well, what do you mean? And she said, you guys just call somebody psychotic or schizophrenic or whatever. In our view of things, in our Native American view, the person is just focusing on a different dimension. And they need to be taught how to refocus in this dimension. In the Native American view of world, there's multiple dimensions. And if you start to focus on one, then you'll seem like a fool in this dimension because you're too focused in the wrong dimension for this space. And so when I thought about it, I thought, boy, that is a much more loving view of things than people, oh, he's crazy, he's gone psychotic, he's whatever.
Yeah.
You know, that he's just focused in the wrong dimension. And we just got to bring him back into this dimension and help him to focus in this dimension, and then he'll come to his senses. And so anyway, but that's kind of the story there.
Yeah, I imagine it helps you to get through to someone when you respect what they're going through in a way that's not demeaning to their character. You know,
Right.
It's like, I understand what you're going through. Let's actually work on it together.
And also I think that's a way that lucid dreamers could also help the psychological community. You know, in some of these lucid dreams, you'll meet what I call an independent agent, kind of a dream figure that seems to be self-aware and not a projection of your mind, and have its own agenda and its own kind of conscious awareness. And when you meet that, then you get kind of greater sympathy for people who have dissociative identity disorder, you know, and they've kind of fractured themselves into various aware personalities and all, you know, normally because of some trauma or sexual abuse as a child or something. But I think lucid dreaming really, at least it shows the lucid dreamers that, you know, inside all of us there's a lot of dream projections, you know, that are formed by our mental energy, our thought forms, however you want to talk about it. But there's also within us these kind of independent agents, these, you know, these lucid dream, these selves, these parts of the self that you meet in lucid dreams who have their own agenda. And if nothing else, it gives you kind of a greater sympathy for the people who have developed those independent agents into totally, completely new personalities to kind of hide from the pain or suffering that they endured in their life.
Yeah, it seems like lucid dreams do have some real therapeutic potential. These autonomous entities, they kind of remind me of tulpas. Are you familiar with the term?
No, not familiar.
Well, a tulpa is an autonomous entity that exists alongside your own consciousness, and it's created through intention. So it's like an imaginary friend for adults, but
Right.
It's basically, you know, it's good to recognize that it's not maybe its own conscious entity in a sense. It's more of like a personality substructure that you can create. Maybe you could create like a better form of yourself that you want to imbue with positive properties, or maybe you could just have a little tulpa of light on your shoulder giving you advice. I wonder if you could make something like that in a lucid dream. Instead of chance encountering one of these autonomous beings, maybe you could create one on your own. Maybe it's possible.
You know, I think it is possible, and it's actually when, like I talk about in my books, I say what people have to realize is that dream figures vary. All dream figures are not created equal. So some dream figures are kind of like mayflies. I mean, they're just for the moment. Sometimes they're like the cast of 1,000 characters in a big Hollywood production. They're just kind of, they have no meaning other than to kind of just take up the scenery. But as you go deeper and deeper into lucid dreaming, you'll realize that there's dream figures who have extraordinary intent and extraordinary agency. Like I remember one time, I'm walking down kind of a dusty trail, and there's pine trees and limestone cliff on my right. And I get to the bottom of this river valley, and I look out in front of me about 50 feet, and there's 5 or 6 people dressed up in 15th century French clothing. And then at that moment, I become lucidly aware because, what am I doing seeing people dressed up, like they're from 500 years ago? And then I look down at myself, and I'm wearing green leotards and a white and green silk shirt. And so now I'm fully lucid, and I go up to these people and talk to them, and they are so happy to see me. And I keep asking each one, would you like to go flying with me? Would you like to go flying with me? Finally, one of the ladies say, yes, she'd love to go flying with me. She grabs my forearm, and she goes flying like a maniac down this river valley. And the weird thing is, normally in a lucid dream, when you fly, you kind of have to use your mental energy and really focus and do all that kind of stuff. She was doing all the work. She was just dragging me along down the river valley. And when you meet someone like that, you realize that dream figures vary, and so some of them are just thought forms. They just exist by virtue of your mental energy. But there's some just like Carl Jung said about Philemon, that there's some dream figures within his psyche that he himself did not create. And when you meet those, that's when you really realize that the unconscious mind is much more richer than people understand. And there's really so much more that we still have to learn about it.
Yeah, that's where you really get deep into the world of lucid dreaming. So, okay, to kind of wrap things up, what do you think some of the best techniques for actually achieving a lucid dream are? Because I know one time I tried to do a reality check, and I did a push-up, and I felt every muscle hurt with pain. I was like, oh, I guess this is real life, and sure enough, it was a dream.
Yeah, reality checks are kind of funny because when I started out in 1975, because I had no one to talk to and all, the idea of reality checks was something that never even came to my mind. It wasn't until, I started reading what other people were doing. But one thing I would say about reality checks, everyone should try 2, because sometimes the first one won't work. Like you try to push your finger through your other hand, it might not work. But if you levitate or jump up in the space and see how you kind of float, then you realize that, this isn't gravity, because I would have slammed down to the ground. So whenever you have a reality check that gives you a false reading that you're still dreaming or you're still awake, try a second reality check. But anyway, for myself, what I want to tell people is way back in the early days of lucid dreaming, the number one way that people became lucidly aware was just through the power of suggestion. Just before they go to sleep, really focus, tonight in my dreams, I'm going to be more critically aware. And when I see something strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. Just really focusing on one suggestion like that. That was really the number one way that people became lucidly aware. But probably a good way nowadays. I know you're kind of into polyphasic sleep patterns and all. But if you can wake up 2 hours before you normally do, and do the wake back to bed. Just wake up 2 hours before you normally do. Don't turn on a bunch of lights. Keep pretty quiet to yourself. Maybe go online and read my Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine for free at dreaminglucid.com. And just think about lucid dreaming for 15 or 20 minutes, and then fall back to sleep with the intent to become lucidly aware. That's probably one of the best ways to have a lucid dream.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just so people know what polyphasic sleeping is, that's like, biphasic sleeping is where you sleep twice a day. Monophasic is what most people do, it's once. And polyphasic is where you take one 20-minute nap every 4 hours. So that accounts to 2 hours total of sleep. But since it's all REM, you actually get more REM than most people who get an hour and a half in an 8-hour sleep cycle. And I've always thought it would be interesting if you're sleeping once every 4 hours for 20 minutes, if you made all of those dreams lucid, you would never be unconscious again. But the problem with this, it sounds kind of like the person going 7 dreams deep. It sounds like maybe that's a little too much for a person to handle. So maybe I wouldn't advise that, actually. It's just a thought experiment.
Okay. But, in my history, I started out by looking at my hands. So that was kind of like a Pavlovian experiment. I made the sight of my hands the stimulus that would prompt me to realize this is a dream. And so every time I saw my hands, my first thought would be, this is a dream. And so that helped me, probably have 2 or 3 or 4 lucid dreams a month. And then I learned some other techniques and began to have more. But I did, I talked about it in my second book, how I got up to having 30 lucid dreams a month.
Oh.
By a technique I call developing a lucid mindset. And it's a little bit complicated to explain and all, but in my second book, I explain how I went about doing that. And so there are things that you can do in the waking state that'll just get your mind just focused on realizing that you're in a dream.
That's interesting. It seems like dream journaling is really important because otherwise you might not remember the dream. Yeah, I've always found this technique is interesting. It's called dream chaining. So you ever wake up from a dream and then go back to sleep and continue the dream?
Yeah.
This is a technique where you alter the memory. So let's say you wake up and you were on a cruise ship, right? But you weren't lucid. Right. You wake up and you pretend like you were lucid, but you weren't, and you'll go back into the dream lucid. I always thought that was a fascinating technique.
Yeah, in my book, I call that dream reentry, and there's certain things you can do to make dream reentry. It's like you reenter the dream and it like skips 10 seconds, like it's a bad CD or something that just skipped through the song 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden it starts up again, but this time you're lucidly aware within that dream scene that you woke up from, 4 or 5 minutes earlier. But yeah, there's some incredible things you can do, but it does take a little bit of practice. It takes a little bit of intent. I always tell people you got to playfully persist because you're probably not going to be a lucid dream superstar, in the first 6 months or something. But if you just playfully persist at it, you'll have some fun. You'll learn some things about your life, and if you do something like interact with the awareness behind the dream, you might even have your mind blown.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you have any experiences with any dream herbs, like maybe mugwort or antonariti, or I've heard of galactamine, but I don't think that's an herb. I think that's like a medicine. So do you have any experience with the herbs or any of the technologies, like the eyewear or the binaural beats? Do you find those to be any success?
Yeah, it was funny. After my first book came out, a guy in Florida who had read it, he became a super huge fan. And so he sent me his dream mask that he had created, that would shine red lights in your eyes, when you were having a dream. And so he sent it to me, and, there's a little instruction thing on how to program the thing and plug it in and wear the sleep mask at night. And so the first night I did it, I woke up in the middle of the night and I realized that for some reason the machine wasn't working or whatever, and I hadn't programmed it right. So the next night I focused on it and programmed the thing just right and was sure it was working. So that night I'm driving down 13th Street and it's snowing, and suddenly I see a car in front of me. It goes into the ditch, and suddenly these red lights are flashing. And I think, red lights? Oh, it's that stupid dream mask I have on myself. This is a dream. And at that moment, I float out of my car and go on and have an incredible lucid dream. But here's the funny thing. When I woke up, I looked at the dream mask and it still wasn't working. It was just my expectation. It was just kind of the placebo effect. I thought it would work, and so in that way I created the red lights in this scenario.
That's hilarious.
I never could get that stupid dream mask work. But when it comes to herbs, one thing, I just want to say a caveat emptor to everyone, buyer beware. Some of these herbs are about having vivid dreams. Vivid dreams are not necessarily lucid dreams. They may be vivid, but they're not lucid dreams. So mugwort, I think, is one that's really more connected with vivid dreams, or people hundreds of years ago would say, possibly prophetic dreams, but they're not necessarily lucid dreams. There is that herbal supplement. It's created by this galantamine. It's created by the active ingredient in Alzheimer's drugs, and it's actually based on a compound that comes from the red spider lily and another type of lily plant. That one is really a powerful herb, and actually there's been a little bit of research on it that seems to suggest that it does help people become lucid. But again, it's a chemically influenced lucid dream, and so you might have a very long lucid dream and a very stable lucid dream, but you don't do anything. You're aware in the space, but you just don't do anything. And so that's what I hate about that. I probably tried galantamine 3 or 4 times, but it's a pretty powerful herbal supplement, and you got to take it as directed. You don't want to take it as you fall asleep at night. You want to take it after you've been asleep for 4 or 5 hours. But again, if the chemicals influence the lucid dream too much, then the lucid dream loses some of its magic. And so that's why that whole herbal thing, they haven't quite figured it out yet. Maybe someday there'll be kind of a biochemical doorway into lucid dreaming, but I don't think they've gotten there yet.
Yeah, it reminds me of what we were saying with psychedelics. It's probably best if you can just depend on yourself, because then, well, 1, that's free, and 2, it's just, there's something more real about being able to lucid dream and achieve this level of awareness completely on your own.
Yeah, just using mental techniques and body physiology and all. It's not really that hard, and again, it's a good mental discipline, because a lot of lucid dreaming is about mindfulness, and that mindfulness can also occur in the waking state, and you can just make it part of your life.
Yeah, okay. Well, all right. So that brings me to my last question. Of course, it's kind of 2 questions, but I'm just going to say it's 1. But how long does it usually take to achieve a lucid dream? That way people aren't discouraged on, maybe their 3rd attempt, nothing's happened. And do you think we'll ever find a way to guarantee a lucid dream 100% someday in the future?
I would say that most people should be able to have a lucid dream within 2 weeks of trying. The only problem is some people go online and they'll find somebody who has some crazy technique like, oh, just do reality checks all day. The first guy who did reality checks all the time was Paul Thoele back in 1959. He was a German psychologist. It took him a month before he had his first lucid dream. And some of these people who do reality checks, they go on for like 2 or 3 months before they have a lucid dream. To me, that's a losing game. I'm not going to wait 3 months before I have a lucid dream. Right. So I think it's better to, if you're suggestible, you can use the power of suggestion. If you're good at visualization, I have some visualization techniques in my book. But normally you ought to be able to do it with 2 weeks of focus. Now, one thing I realize is that some people have bad sleep habits. Like I do these online workshops at Glidewing, and so this woman still hadn't had a lucid dream. I do these 30-day online workshops. She hadn't had a lucid dream after 2 weeks, and she was getting discouraged. And I said, well, tell me your pre-sleep routine. And she goes, oh, I go to the bathroom, and then I wash my face, and I brush my teeth, and then I take my sleeping pills, and I go to sleep. And I said, sleeping pills? Are you kidding me? You're taking sleeping pills and you're trying to have lucid dreams?
Yeah.
And finally, she weaned herself off of sleeping pills and learned, and actually became a very good lucid dreamer. But again, some people have bad sleep habits. Like they're
like cannabis or alcohol. Both of those will mess with it.
Yeah, those kind of things. Now, whether or not someday we'll be able to kind of have a 99%, 100% guarantee of having a lucid dream, You know, I think someday we might get it up to 60, 70, 80%. Um, it might be some gadget. It might be some sound that clicks us over, or it might be some biochemical thing that you take one of these and you're 80% likely to have a lucid dream. But we're not there yet, and until we get there, you're just gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way, which is these mental techniques.
Yeah, I mean, apparently you don't even need the mask, according to your experience, which is...
you just gotta expect that the bloody thing's gonna work. I mean, that's what placebo is all about. You take that little sugar pill, but it's not a sugar pill. The doctor told you that it would cure everything. And so what happens? You get cured, and it was the expectation all along. So that really shows you that the power of the mind at creating our experience is truly phenomenal.
And it's also, I think it's part of the magic behind a lucid dream, because it's not something that you can get by just taking a pill. You have to work towards it. And once you work towards it, you benefit from the work that got you there. So it's
exactly.
It's kind of nice, honestly. So, okay, Robert, thank you so much for the interview. It was an amazing conversation. I'm really glad we finally got to have it. Where can our listeners find your work?
Yeah, so my book website is lucidadvice.com, and that also tells where I'm giving talks or doing online workshops and stuff. And then also we have a free online magazine called the Lucid Dreaming Experience. So if you go to dreaminglucid.com, there you'll see our free magazine. You can see our past issues. You can sign up if you want to be a free online subscriber. So that's where you can check out my work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robert. It was a real pleasure, and I hope all of our listeners are able to have a lucid dream as soon as possible, maybe even tonight.
Exactly. Lucid wishes, everyone. Thanks, Isaac.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Robert. He certainly has some fascinating ideas about lucid dreaming. Since speaking with him, I've tried to connect with the awareness behind the dream, and I was able to do so without even being lucid. So maybe set that intention the next time you fall asleep and see what happens. You may just learn something that has real value. Next up on the Lucid Truth is Lena Sackwild, who's a lucid dreaming coach from the UK who studies consciousness and transpersonal psychology. I'm looking forward to discussing beneficial methods of lucid dreaming and to muse about the nature of reality with another experienced psychonaut. You can find the Lucid Truth podcast on our website, thelucidtruth.com, or on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. You can support it by sharing it with your friends, donating on Patreon, or following us on your favorite podcatcher. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for the next episode of The Lucid Truth.